What's amazing about the Kansas City Chiefs organization, they're 8-0 now on the year. I think they've won 6 games, 6 of the 8 in one-score games. Going into last night, I believe the Chiefs were something like 19th in touchdown passes. They're not. Patrick Mahomes isn't lighting up the league. This is year 2 of them averaging about 20 to 23 points a game. They win in different ways. I mean, they've completely reinvented themselves over a 3-year period in a sport that really doesn't allow you to reinvent yourself because of economics. And look at them now. They're 8-0 in the year, and they're a team that's going to go out and score 25 points a game and win most of them that way. Again, this year. All the things that sink most other franchises, all the excuses that every other franchise would have, it doesn't stop nor affect the Chiefs. Players leave. Star players leave. They replace them. Players get hurt. Happens all the time. It's, every team in the NFL, because the roster size is in the 50s, it's so small in a 17-game season, it is impossible not to come back to the pack if you lose a couple of players. You're just not allowed, out of greed, you're not allowed to have much depth. So players on teams get hurt. Next thing you know, they're middle of the pack or worse. Not the Chiefs. They get people hurt. They lose star players. And they find more. And we don't even know where they find them. They just keep finding more. A player flames out. Even happens to the Chiefs. They just quickly replace them. You forget about him in no time. A star player, Mr. Swift, at the beginning of the year, Mr. Swift was fat and slow, and we all thought, yeah, he kind of deserves it. It's been a Hall of Fame career. It's time to shut it down. It's completely understandable he's fat and slow. Next thing you know, he's not fat and slow, and he's catching 14 passes on Monday Night Football, and he looks like he's 25 again. The biggest star in the sport limps off the field. And you think, oh no, there goes the night, and not only that, there goes the franchise. I mean, every time you look at the Chiefs just as a whole, and you think, they can't come back from that. Patrick Mahomes is being carried off the field, and then he comes back on, and they calmly go down the field in overtime and win in Monday Night Football. You can't. It's funny about the NFL. We all want to compare players, present-day players, to past players, to generations, to decades, all that stuff. And it's really tough to do that in the NFL, to take teams and say, well, that team was a dynasty compared to that other dynasty. It's not easy to do, nor is it fair to do because of the economics of the NFL. The NFL is set up, for people to just know, on a very strict salary cap. That means X amount of money comes in, X amount of money for every team is allocated for salaries. Just because you're in Dallas doesn't mean you get to spend more money than if you're in Cincinnati. It's the same. And it's set up to bring everybody back. It's set up as a system along with the draft to make sure somebody else is good every now and then. Sooner or later, the Detroit Lions were eventually going to be good. It's built that way. So it's harder than ever, I would submit to you, to win consistently. The NFL model is built to create turnover, and it works. It's fun. It's what makes the sport so popular, is that every now and then every city can think one day we'll be the Detroit Lions again. But here's a nerdy thing I noticed about the Chiefs, on top of just how masterful it is that they run their operation and keep finding players after players after players, and how they reinvent the way they play the game. They win with defense and special teams now. That's how they win. And they're fine with it. And they'll lose more players and they'll replace them. They'll find somebody off a couch and the guy will end up being a good player. But here's a nerdy thing I've noticed also, extra nerdy about the Chiefs. Then we'll argue about the math. They might be the best tackling team in football. And just use the eyeball test, okay? Especially, I would say, their secondary. So here's the eyeball test. Notice how a Chiefs defender will go in for a tackle, particularly their defensive backs who just come running up at the line of scrimmage. I mean, they go all out. But if you just watch the Chiefs play, and look, in the NFL, you're paid, when you're a defensive back, you're paid to cover people. You're paid to stop the pass. It's one of the toughest positions in all of sports. And so you're not necessarily paid to tackle a lot, but they do. Notice how a Chiefs defender will hit a ball carrier, tackle a ball carrier, and that ball carrier stopped in his tracks. If somebody crunched the numbers on yards after contact against the Chiefs, I'll bet you they're near the best in the league. You know, I always read these stats, offensive stats. You fantasy nerds know this stuff, and that is yards after catch or yards after contact, stuff like that. If you flip it around on the defensive side and say, why is it when the Chiefs come up for a tackle and they get a hold of you, you're not going anywhere, you go down. They're not cheap shots, they're not brutal hits, they just tackle perfectly. A perfect tackle is you don't get any more yards. They win with solid defense and special teams, even if their kicker is from 1876. He's really good. They got it all figured out. So let's get extra nerdy about last night's game. The Bucs tied the game with, I believe there was 27 seconds left. And, you know, again, Baker Mayfield, maybe one of the more underappreciated players in football today. I mean, really, that shouldn't be a Tampa Bay team that goes into Kansas City and takes them to overtime. They're missing their best receiver. They don't have very many anyway. And they're doing it because, one, they're pretty well coached. And two, Baker Mayfield just keeps playing and playing and playing and creating and creating and creating. He's really underappreciated, I think. But they tie the game up with 27 seconds left in the game. All right. And Kansas City gets the ball back. There was some criticism that maybe the Buccaneers could have, they called a timeout. You know, Troy Aikman doing the game said, yeah, you should have called the timeout. I sort of agree. You don't want to give Patrick Mahomes any time left on the clock. They did. Kansas City ends up punting away to take the game to overtime. It's tied. The question of the day, I've seen it on fan pages for this show. I've seen it in practically every sports site I can think of. And let me argue with how wrong people are about this. We'll do the thing where we take all of our feelings out of it. And so the question of the day, this is true if you're a real football nerd or not, but think it through. The question would be, Tampa Bay scores with 27 seconds left. They cut the lead to within 1. Okay? Should the Buccaneers have gone for 2 instead of risk losing the toss and allowing the Chiefs to have the ball first in overtime? In other words, go for the 2-point play now, roll the dice now, try to win the game now, as opposed to going to overtime to play against the most dangerous guy with the ball in his hands in the sport. 99 out of 100 people, I think, just based on reactions today, would say, right on, you've got to go for 2 and go for the win. The last thing you would ever want to do is let Patrick Mahomes have a ball again. You're wrong, okay? I know it worked out that way, but when you make sensible decisions, that's the wrong decision to make. And I'll back it up. So you feel like we got to win the game now, right? Okay, so here is the coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I agree with him. Now, in hindsight, you would say, well, you're wrong. This coach is wrong. They should have gone for 2 in the night now. Don't let Mahomes have the ball. He's going to do exactly what he did to you.